When you think of Japan, most of us picture Tokyo. Trains leaving right on the second, streets lit up everywhere, and millions of people moving at a pace that pretty much never stops. But if you head south, there is a totally different Japan. A chain of over 160 islands scattered across the East China Sea, where the crowded cities slowly fade away. High-rises make way for low-rise neighborhoods tucked into green subtropical forests, and stretches of white sand hug turquoise water so clear you can see the coral reefs right at the bottom. This is Okinawa. Everything here feels just like paradise. But that beauty didn't just happen by chance. The Kuroshio Current brings warm water and life straight through the islands. The subtropical climate keeps nature thriving pretty much year-round. Along with being broken up across the ocean, these special conditions have created an environment totally different from the rest of Japan. And that isolation didn't just shape the landscape, it built a really unique history and identity. Okinawa used to be the center of the Ryukyu kingdom. Each part of the islands still holds onto local languages, customs, and traditions that are different from mainland Japan. The sea decides how they make a living. Culture shapes the people of Okinawa, and the community is what keeps them going in a world so far from the mainland. This is the story of life in Okinawa, Japan's best-kept tropical paradise. Okinawa sits far away from Japan's major hubs. The islands stretch for nearly 1,000 kilometers across the East China Sea. Some islands are developed and well-connected. Others are so small that life pretty much just revolves around one village, a port, and a few coastal roads. The moment you step foot in Okinawa, the differences show up in the smallest details. The air is warm and humid. The wind carries the smell of sea salt. Hibiscus and other tropical flowers pop up along the road. Even the light in Okinawa seems different. The sun reflects off the sea. The forests look deep green. The clustered red tile roofs stand out against the green trees. Offshore, the Kuroshio Current brings warm water through the islands, letting an underwater world thrive almost all year long. Coral reefs spread out under the clear water, acting as a hideout for hundreds of tropical fish species. Butterfly fish, parrotfish, and schools of colorful little fish weave through the coral branches. Sea turtles make their way to shallow waters. Octopuses, sea urchins, clams, and lots of crustaceans hide in the rock crevices. Close to shore, Mizuku seaweed covers the bottom and has become a regular part of Okinawan meals. The underwater world doesn't just make the islands beautiful. The sea also provides food. The forest provides living space. The climate decides what crops can grow. In Okinawa, nature is exactly what dictates how life works here. Over in Tokyo, being a few minutes late can mess up an entire schedule. But in Okinawa, time works a bit differently. Locals call this pace of life ukaina time. Schedules still exist. Work still needs to get done. But time isn't seen as something that has to be controlled at all costs. A tropical rainstorm might suddenly pour down. People just stop and wait for it to pass. A neighbor drops by. Work might be paused to share a cup of sanpin cha, a popular jasmine tea on the island. Not every meetup needs an appointment. Not every passing minute has to be turned into productivity. Here, spending time on someone else isn't seen as a waste. Outsiders often misunderstand a kind of time as just being slow. But to Okinawans, it is a philosophy of life. Instead of racing against the clock, the people here usually slow down to enjoy every moment. In lots of coastal villages, a new day kicks off before the sun even comes up. From offshore, small boats head back to port, one after another. Engine noises echo across the calm water. Crates of fish get passed off the decks, loaded with tuna, bonito, and reef fish that were just pulled from the sea minutes ago. From the docks, that food makes its way to the local markets. But an Okinawan market doesn't just wake up to the sound of knives hitting cutting boards or people shouting prices. It wakes up with familiar meetups. Sellers spot their regular customers from a distance. Between the chopping sounds, the sales pitches, and the smell of sea fish, conversations about family, kids, and whatever just happened in the neighborhood just keep flowing. Around here, buying and selling rarely happens in silence. Money changes hands, but at the same time, memories, advice, and news get passed around too. It is these very conversations that make the market the heartbeat of the community. In many Okinawan villages, houses are surrounded by low walls built from coral limestone. They are sturdy enough to block the sea wind, but not high enough to cut people off from one another. From one yard, you can still hear people talking in the next yard over. Doors are usually left open. Kids run through the narrow streets. Private life still exists, but it is rarely locked up behind four walls. A neighbor can just walk on over. They share whatever they have. The community spirit shows up best when the Obon season rolls around. This is the time when Okinawans welcome the spirits of their ancestors back home. Over 3 days, based on the lunar calendar, families offer food, light incense, and gather in front of the altar. On the last night, called Ukui, they get ready to send their ancestors back to the other side. Out on the village roads, the sound of Isa drums starts ringing out. Youth groups from each neighborhood put on traditional outfits, carrying big drums, small drums, and the sanshin instrument. They parade through the neighborhoods in a ritual called Michi-jun. The footsteps and drum beats aren't just there to see the ancestors off. They also bring wishes for peace, health, and prosperity to every family. Asa was never meant to be a show for tourists. It was born from ancestor worship and the need to keep the community tight-knit. Okinawans always have a way to stay close to each other. Not just close in distance, but close in looking out for one another. Okinawa is known as the land of the immortals, where life expectancy is the highest in the world. Ogimi village has a stone monument engraved with the words, "At 80, you are merely a youth. At 90, if your ancestors invite you to heaven, ask them to wait until you are 100, then you might consider it." According to 2023 stats, this village of over 3,000 people has 20 folks over 100 years old and 1,233 over 65. It is also considered one of the 5 blue zones in the world, where people live the longest and happiest. Nearly 2/3 of people, over 97, on Okinawa Island still live independently in their own homes and cook for themselves. Their diet is seen as the classic difference for Okinawans, as they have 5 or more servings of fruits and veggies a day and eat way more fish than meat. Okinawans have a saying, "Nuchi gusui," which means treating food as medicine. They eat sweet potatoes, bitter melon, mugwort, ginger, turmeric, and things packed with carotenoids like seaweed, greens, and fruits. Carotenoids are plant pigments found in dark leafy greens that pack a strong antioxidant punch, helping to lower the risk of cancer, reduce inflammation, ease stress, and fight aging. Before eating, Okinawans also keep in mind a phrase called hara hachi bu, which means stopping when you are 80% full. This rule helps the islanders stay mindful while eating, so they do not overeat. On average, Okinawans take in about 1,900 calories a day. On top of that, Okinawans stay pretty active. They garden at home, practice Tai Chi in the park, ride bikes, and play croquet with friends. Almost all the centenarians in Okinawa do some gardening. It serves as both a light workout and a great way to soak up plenty of vitamin D from the sun, keeping their bones and joints strong. Okinawan society also stresses the importance of having each other's backs, mainly by joining community groups called moai. It helps connect people with shared interests and builds emotional bonds. Okinawan kids are put into moai groups of 4 to 5 people right from a really young age and commit to sticking together. These groups act like a safety net or a second family, offering emotional and sometimes even financial support to one another. This tradition has been around for hundreds of years in Okinawa. It is also a big reason why the folks here live so long. If you want to understand Okinawa, you have to look at the unique and proud history of this land. For centuries, these islands didn't belong to Japan, but were the center of an independent country called the Ryukyu Kingdom. Sitting right between major shipping routes, Ryukyu connected China, Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. The ships didn't just bring cargo, they brought in languages, music, food, and beliefs from all kinds of different places. Over time, it all blended together, creating a culture unlike anywhere else. The clearest sign of that past is Shuri Castle, which used to be the political hub of the kingdom. Chinese touches show up right alongside Japanese influences, serving as a reminder that Okinawa had its own vibe long before it became a part of modern Japan. That history still shows up in how the locals see themselves. A lot of people call themselves Uchinanchu. It is not just a term for Okinawan people. It is a memory of a community that used to live off the sea, traded across the sea, and protected its identity while surrounded by bigger powers. Today, Okinawa belongs to Japan, but in the music, the meals, the language, and the memories of the people, this place still beats to the rhythm of its own world. The Ryukyu identity doesn't just show up in historical sites, it stays alive in everyday life. In lots of villages, the sound of the sanshin still rings out as evening sets in. The snakeskin-covered three-stringed instrument makes a soft, deep, and slightly sad sound. Those melodies tell stories about love, the ocean, breakups, and painful memories passed down through generations. To Okinawans, the sanshin isn't just music. It is how the past keeps speaking in the present. When Obon season hits, quiet streets suddenly shake with the sound of Isa drums. Youth groups in traditional gear walk through the neighborhoods to honor their ancestors. This isn't just a show put on for tourists. Every drumbeat is the community's way of proving that memories are being kept safe and that the ones who passed away still have a place in the lives of the living. The Ryukyu mark also shows up on vibrant bingata fabrics. Ocean waves, flowers, birds, and island landscapes are dyed into colorful patterns. Okinawa's nature doesn't just surround its people, it weaves into their clothes, their art, and how they view their home. But there is one piece of heritage that is slowly fading. Uchinaguchi and a bunch of other native languages on the islands aren't widely used in everyday life anymore. Most young people speak standard Japanese. That is why craftsmen, teachers, and conservation groups are still trying to pass down every old saying, song, and pronunciation. Because when a language dies out, people don't just lose a few words, they lose a specific way to call out to the sea, a way to remember their ancestors, and a way of seeing the world that belongs only to Okinawa. Behind the peaceful beaches, Okinawa runs on an economy much more complicated than what tourists get to see. For centuries, folks lived off the land and the sea. In coastal towns, fishing boats still return to port every morning, connecting fishing families to the local market and the whole community's meals. Inland, sugarcane fields stretch out under the subtropical sun. The sugarcane is boiled down into kokuto, a rich brown sugar that has become an island specialty. In between are gardens of pineapples, mangoes, shikawasa, and Benimo purple sweet potatoes. Most of these aren't massive corporate farms. They belong to families who have worked the exact same plot of land for generations. The yields might not be huge, but every harvest season keeps people tied to the dirt they were born on. These days, the economic vibe has shifted. Tourism has become Okinawa's biggest lifeline. Tourists show up for the blue water, the coral reefs, and the feeling of stepping into a lesser-known Japan. Because of that, jobs pop up in hotels, restaurants, transport, scuba diving, and beachside services. But that kind of prosperity is pretty fragile. When tourist numbers drop, a bunch of industries stall out all at once. On the small islands, where job options are already tight, relying on tourism is even more obvious. Because of this, Okinawa faces a tough problem, continuing to make a living off its beauty, but not letting its entire future rely on people who just come and go. Behind the clear blue beaches and bright coral reefs, Okinawa carries another layer of reality that is hard to separate from daily life. The presence of US military bases. They have been on the island since World War II, providing jobs for a lot of locals and chipping into a chunk of the local economy. But on an island chain, with pretty tight space, every bit of land holds special value. That is why the sheer size of the bases is still a hot topic for debate in lots of communities. For some families, they are tied to jobs and income. For others, they serve as a reminder that a lot of big decisions about the island are still shaped by powers outside of Okinawa. That is one of the deepest paradoxes of this place. On one side, you have the image of a peaceful, tropical paradise. On the other, you have historical, military, and political footprints that never really vanished. The locals don't just live among the blue sea, subtropical forests, and coastal roads. They also live among questions about land, identity, and the right to decide the future of their own home. Today's Okinawa is a piece of modern Japan, carries the memories of the Ryukyu kingdom, and still heavily feels the impact of the US presence. 3 layers of history living together on a narrow strip of land out in the ocean. And it is exactly that overlapping that makes life in Okinawa way more complicated than the peaceful vibe you see from the outside. To tourists, the Okinawan Sea is something to look at, but to locals, it is just an extension of their home. Families gather on the sand at the end of the day. Kids grow up in the shallow waters, learning to swim before they can even grasp how massive the ocean really is. Adults head out to sea to make a living, dive down to the reefs, fish near the shore, or just sit back and watch the sun slowly dip below the horizon. The sea is a workplace, but it is also a quiet space for people to reconnect with each other. Below the crystal-clear surface is a whole other world. Tropical fish weave through the coral branches. Manta rays glide through the deep water. Humpback whales show up as they migrate past the islands, but that life is way more fragile than it looks. Just a tiny change in temperature can cause coral bleaching. Pollution, coastal construction, and massive crowds of tourists keep piling heavier and heavier pressure on this ecosystem. Because of that, the sea doesn't just feed Okinawa. It also forces folks to be responsible for where they live. Because if the coral reefs vanish, Okinawa won't just lose some pretty scenery. The islands will lose a piece of their livelihood, their memories, and the very foundation that has kept the community alive for generations. Okinawa isn't only shaped by the sea. Up in the northern part of the main island, Yanbaru opens up like a totally different world. Little dirt roads weave through thick subtropical forests. Waterfalls hide under the tree canopy. The sound of bugs mixes with bird calls, covering the whole area from early morning until it gets dark. Deep inside that forest, there are lots of species you won't find anywhere else. The most special one is the flightless Okinawa rail bird. Just having it around goes to show that the islands have been isolated long enough for nature to do its own thing. But to Okinawans, the forest isn't just a spot for hiking or exploring. Certain parts of the woods are seen as sacred. The Ryukyu people call these places utaki. They don't necessarily have to have shrines or huge buildings. Sometimes, just a clump of trees, a rock, or a quiet patch of dirt is enough to be a place where folks connect with their ancestors and spirits. That mindset shows that nature holds a really special place in Okinawan life. The sea feeds the community. The forest protects what is left of the past. And both of them aren't just resources to be used up, but spaces with their own memories, beliefs, and spiritual life. Living in Okinawa means getting used to distances. On the main island, the roads are pretty well developed. Coastal routes connect Naha to towns, fishing villages, and the countryside further out. Monorails glide through the city, right between commercial districts and rows of modern concrete buildings. But once you leave the main island, the pace of life changes instantly. Ferries and speedboats become the lifelines between the islands. They carry folks to work, bring food into the villages, and haul mail, medicine, and small packages across the sea. For tourists, a ferry ride might be a chance to gaze at the blue water stretching all the way to the horizon. But for locals, it is just their usual route to get to the hospital, drop kids off at school, or pick up things they can't find on the island. The small airports in Ishigaki, Miyako, and Yonaguni help cut down on hours spent drifting at sea. But all those connections still depend on the weather. When a storm rolls in, ferries stay stuck in the port. Flights get cancelled. Cargo shows up late. An island that was just in touch with the outside world can turn right back into a closed-off bubble in the middle of the ocean in a matter of hours. Okinawa is gorgeous because it is surrounded by the sea, but that exact same sea dictates where people can go, when they can come back, and how long they have to wait. Traditional houses in Okinawa are really easy to spot. The red tile roofs sit low. Coral stone walls wrap around the yard. On the roof, or right in front of the gate, there is usually a Shisa statue, a mythical creature believed to chase off bad vibes and protect the family. But behind that old school look is a building style born from Typhoons. Houses are built low to cut down on wind pressure. The stone walls help block harsh winds coming off the sea. The roof tiles have to be heavy and sturdy enough so they don't get ripped off the frame. Okinawa sits right in the path of a lot of tropical storms. So, folks don't wait for the sky to change color to start getting ready. They stock up on food, reinforce their doors, clear out things that could blow away, and constantly track where the storm is headed. Once the wind dies down, the whole neighborhood steps back outside. Some clear branches. Others check on roofs. Some help out families who got hit harder with damages. Fixing things up is rarely just a one-house job. These days, a lot of new houses are built with concrete so they can hold up better. But they still stand right next to the old red tile roofs and stone walls. The two architecture styles exist together, telling a story of adapting that stretches across generations. In Okinawa, a house isn't just a place to crash. It is the people's answer to a question that has repeated for hundreds of years. How do you keep living on an island that is constantly tested by nature? Okinawan kids grow up in a world different from most of Japan. The sea is always close by. Grandparents usually don't live too far away. And in these little communities, adults don't just know a kid's name, they also know exactly which house their family belongs to. At school, they still get a modern education. But alongside regular subjects, the sound of the sanshin, the beat of the Asa drum, and Ryukyu history are still passed on. That is how Okinawa keeps its younger generation tied to the land they were born on. But as they grow up, a lot of them have to face a tough choice. Specialized colleges, well-paying jobs, and bigger chances to grow are usually found in Tokyo, Osaka, or big cities on the mainland. Leaving Okinawa ends up becoming a pretty common move. For many, it is the first time they live in a city where no one knows who their parents are. No one stops to ask how the family is doing. Everything is faster, much bigger, and has more open doors. But in the middle of all that hustle, their bond with Okinawa rarely fades away. After a few years of studying or working, a lot of folks start thinking about heading back. They want to live close to their parents. They want their kids to grow up surrounded by the sea, nature, and a community that genuinely cares about each other. They bring back new skills to open eateries using local farm goods, build small tourism businesses, or weave Ryukyu patterns into modern products. But coming back takes more than just hometown pride. It takes a job stable enough to build a future. And that is Okinawa's biggest challenge: how to keep young people around without forcing them to give up opportunities that only exist across the ocean. During the day, Okinawa always seems to be facing the sea. The beaches are packed with people talking. The markets open up early. Fishing boats come back carrying the smell of salt, and crates of seafood still chilled from the ocean water. Out at the port, ferries loaded with passengers and cargo constantly leave the dock. Under the harsh sun, everything just looks brighter, from the water to the red tile roofs tucked behind the trees. But when the sun starts getting low, the island shifts gears to a different rhythm. The sky slowly goes from yellow to orange, then light pink. The heat fades out from the streets. Little shops close up. Engine noises at the port thin out, making way for the sounds of wind and waves. Folks head home to grab dinner with their families. Friends meet up in small izakayas, where food gets dropped right in the middle of the table, and stories stretch out slowly. Sometimes, from an open door, the sound of a sanshin rings out into the warm night. The sound isn't loud, but it is enough to make the whole neighborhood feel like it is slowing down. Out on the faraway islands, the darkness gets even deeper. There aren't many city lights blocking out the sky. The stars show up thick over the sea. Besides the sounds of geckos, bugs, and crashing waves, there is pretty much nothing else. This is the part of life that rarely makes it into Okinawa's promotional ads. No festivals, no sun-soaked beaches. Just a quiet evening when people head back to their families, their neighbors, and themselves. And for a lot of Okinawans, that peace is one of the deepest reasons they stick around. After all the limits of living on an island, one question still hangs in the air. Why do people not just leave Okinawa? A ton of young people have left before. They go to Tokyo, Osaka, or bigger cities to study and find work. But after a few years, quite a few of them come right back. Not because Okinawa is an easier place to live, but because there are things here that are really hard to find anywhere else. They come back for their families. In Okinawa, family isn't just something behind the front door of a house. It stretches out to grandparents, relatives, neighbors, and people who have known each other for generations. Kids grow up in a neighborhood where the adults know whose kids they are. When a child runs into trouble, it isn't just the parents looking out for them. They come back for the pace of life. Around here, time isn't constantly pushing people forward. There is still work, bills and responsibilities to handle, but in the middle of all that, people can still stop to chat, eat together, or just sit and watch the ocean change colors at the end of the day. They come back for the culture, for the sound of the sanshin echoing out of a little joint, for the asa drums ringing out during Obon season, for the meals that carry the taste of a home kitchen. Those things might seem super normal to the folks living here, but the second they leave the island, they become the things people miss the most. They come back for their ancestors. Generations have fished the same waters, gone through the exact same storms, and rebuilt roofs every time nature threw a fit. Every village holds onto stories that only someone born there could completely get. But above all, they stay because of the ocean. The sea doesn't just sit in front of the house. It shows up in their work, their meals, their music, and their memories. It takes Okinawans off the island, but it is also the very thing that always guides them back. Because of that, leaving Okinawa isn't just leaving a location. To a lot of people, it means leaving behind a piece of who they are. Okinawa exists somewhere between things that shouldn't make sense together. It is a tropical paradise, but it is also a place where a typhoon can flip life upside down in just a few hours. An isolated island chain in the middle of the ocean, but it used to sit right on the trade routes connecting Japan with China and Southeast Asia. Okinawa belongs to modern Japan, but in the music, the language, and the memories, the soul of the Ryukyu kingdom has never faded away. Life here is slower, but it doesn't stand still. Folks still have to adapt to high living costs, tight job options, and the growing pressure from tourism. Young people have to choose between staying close to family or ditching the island for a wider, open future. Coastal communities also have to figure out how to grow without messing up the coral reefs, the subtropical forests, and the waters that have fed them for generations. Maybe it is those exact limits that built Okinawa. The distance makes people need each other more. Typhoons make the community realize the value of sharing. And change turns tradition into something that has to be protected, not just remembered. That is why a meal with every generation at the table isn't just a meal. A festival isn't just a show, and a ferry ride isn't just a way off the island. They are all threads that keep people tied to their families, their ancestors, and the place they belong. At Japan's best-kept tropical paradise, life isn't measured by speed. It is measured by the rhythm of the tides, by the beat of a drum ringing through a village, by the waiting lights of a returning ferry, and by the feeling that no matter how vast the ocean gets, there is still a place people call home.